So in this episode, I really want to do some maths with you. Now, don't panic, don't switch off. It'll all be fine. And I'll show you a spreadsheet. And it's so easy. We might even be able to put some graphs in here. Right. So I want to talk about two specific words. One, inflation. And this is where you leave your money, for example, in the bank and it doesn't earn any interest, or you stuff it under your mattress and the amount stays the same. But what's happened in the outside world is the cost of living has risen. And because the cost of living rises, effectively your money is worth less. I'll explain that in more detail. And the second word I want to talk about is investing. And that's where you take the same amount of money and you make sure that it works for you. Now, investing can mean a whole pile of things, from simply putting it into a building society account where you earn interest. We'll cover all of those off. But the key question here is, what are you doing with your money, with your wages? First of all, are you managing it and monitoring it? We've done all of that before. But are you making it work for you in the simplest of ways before we even get into the more detailed, slightly advanced ways of actually investing it, which still should be rudimentary for everybody. So let's get into this. And I suggest this is something that you teach your kids, that you have a conversation with in the wider family, because you could be throwing away a fortune. Hello and welcome to A Wealthy Life. My name's Vicky Wishay, and we're going to be getting right into it today on the topic of, is your money really working for you? And it comes from two words. It comes from inflation and investing, and they mean almost polar opposites to one another. One means your money's doing nothing and in fact decreasing in value, and investing means that your money is working for you and increasing in value for you. So let's just keep it very simple and start off with a couple of key questions that I think you should be answering. Do you monitor your money? Do you monitor your income and expenses? Oh my goodness, how many times have I talked to you about this? This is the wealth tracker. This is a spreadsheet. This is using an app on your phone. This is checking your bank statements on a monthly basis, paying attention to credit card bills. However you want to do it. If you are out there working and earning money, whether you're working as an employee or whether you are running your own business, whatever you're doing, especially if you're running your own business because you're working twice as hard probably as any employee I know, the wages that you receive, however you receive your money, that money needs to be supporting you and doing things for you. So I've spoken about getting rid of debt. We're not even going to cover that off today. We're just talking about the fact that you have been monitoring your money and that you are in a position where you have more money coming in than you have money going out. So at the end of each month, there is some cash left. Perfect. That's just the baseline position that we want to need to be in. Then the next thing we're looking at is, are you financially resilient? So do you have spare cash put somewhere? So we've spoken about financial resilience before, and that's where you've got 3 or 6 months of your bills put into an account to one side. So let's say, for example, that you need 2,000 a month to pay all your bills. In an ideal situation, you'd have a minimum of 6, preferably 12. If your monthly costs, including mortgage, and maybe you've got kids at private school or just kids, quite frankly, is 5,000, then you either want to put 15 or 30,000 pounds away. Now, if you've been following that advice, that's great. But where have you put, and let's just talk about that 30,000 pounds for a moment. Where is that 30,000 pounds, or even 20,000 pounds, 15, 5, whatever the number is? Where is that money? So just recently, we moved a whole lot of money around and I had some money sitting in my Metro Bank account. And I have been a huge fan of Metro Bank since they first opened. Things have changed. They now have increased all their fees and closed a lot of their opening hours and their branches. So I'm less of a huge fan because they're not the same product that I bought into. That's by the way. My money was sitting in Metro, having a conversation because I couldn't make one of my payments. I couldn't get the app to work. So I phoned up, spoke to my human. I said, oh, by the way, while you're on, I've got some money sitting in one of these accounts. Before I go moving it off, how much money am I making in this account? What's the interest on this rate? Now, this is a savings account within a bank. So I've got my current account where all my direct debits go, and I pop my spare money into a savings account. 1.63. That's just over 1.5%. Now, I'd already been looking at accounts that I could move the money into, which was why I was moving things around. One of the things I do, and I'll put a link in there so that if you've got some cash that you want to move over, we can both get, I don't know, a 30 or 50,000, not, oh, that would be wonderful reward, a 30 or a 50 pound bonus if you use Raisin using my link. But I have opened a Raisin account. Now, a Raisin account is another bank account. And basically what you do is you put your money into Raisin, and then you can choose which of the savings that they offer. They're sort of almost like a money supermarket for savings account. They have quite a few Sharia accounts, which is where it's based on profit rather than really on interest. And then they have companies like Paragon, which if you're into investing in property, Paragon is actually a buy-to-let mortgage lender. So it'd be really interesting. You could put your money in there and borrow from them again, which is really what banks used to all be about. So there's plenty of accounts, and you can read all about what bank it is, and you can put your money away for certain amounts of time. So you can have a no interest period. So this is where you put your money into an account at an agreed rate, and there is no interest. So there's no notice period, so no loss of interest. You can just put your money in, take your money out whenever you want, like a normal building society. Then you can choose a short-term notice period. So you can choose to give 1 month's notice, 3, 6, 9, any amount you like. And then there are fixed term amounts. And this is where you say, I'm going to put my money away for 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, or numbers in between. And really what you have to think about now is what money you've got, what might be coming up in the next 3, 6, 12 months, what money you might need, and how you might like to allocate it across these accounts. So I did this literally at the weekend, opened up my Raisin account and moved all of that money out of Metro Bank at 1.63. And then I lined it up and I went, okay, so here's 10 grand. What do I want to do with the 10 grand? What I want to do is I want to put some of it away on easy access. So I'm just going to be able to, anytime I want it, I can get it. And some of it I'm going to put away on a 3 months notice, because really, if I just split it 5 and 5, £5,000 that I could get at any time, but I'm not going to get quite as high interest rate versus 5 grand that I put away for 3 months when I get a bit more notice and a bit more interest. Is that feel right for me? Now, the difference, quite frankly, was some 0.2% difference. And it probably worked out as, not even 100 quid. But what it also does is it says to me that I need to keep an eye on my money now, because I've got £5,000 as immediate spare money, and I've got another £5,000 as give notice money, because in the next 3 months or with 3 months notice, can I foresee something? Let's say the car broke down and I had to buy a new car, so I needed to put a deposit on it. Well, that's okay, because I'd got 5 grand in easy access money. But also if I wanted to put down more, then, I could put down another 5,000, or I could use a credit card and pay it off, and that would give me a bit more time, etc., etc. So there are ways around it. And if you want the money sooner, you lose the interest because you've broken the terms of your agreement. That's fine. Then I've also got other money that I have stuck into other savings accounts at other rates. So we have, for example, a cash ISA, and the cash ISA, I think, is something like, I'll call it 5% for sake of a number, 5%. And that is interest free, and you are only allowed to put away £20,000 a year. So what we do is we sort of save up in other ways, and then every so often we plot 5, 10, £20,000 until we reach our limit into an ISA, and then that sits there making use of our interest-free allowance. So when the interest rates are high, so for example, last year, I think the interest rates I got were around 6 point something or other, 6.5. And we got £1,500 tax-free. Well, that's quite nice. £1,500 tax-free. Thank you very much. I'll take that. And then that comes back into the main pot and then gets reallocated back out. So the point I'm saying now is take your financial resilience allowance amount, whether it's the 3 months or the 6 months, and think to yourself, how comfortable do I feel? Do I want half of that money in easy access and half of it out there a bit long term? Or, quite frankly, if you've got 6 months money and 6 months money is anywhere from, I don't know, 6 grand to 30 grand, and you want to know that you can get any time you like, you want to be able to access that money, just put it in a no interest but savings account. Because then instead of 1.6, you're getting nearly 5%. That's a big difference. Okay, so that's where you're starting to make your money work harder. You're financially resilient, you've got this, whatever, anything happens money, and then you're earning interest on it. Let me just jump over and talk about inflation. What happens if you just left that money in any old account? If you just left it in your bank account, not even a savings account, a bank account, my current accounts don't earn interest. So my money could be sitting in there, and let's say it's wages and it's built up over time, and I've got the account, all of my direct debits go out, and then I've got my personal account, and I might have 5-10 grand sitting in a personal account earning no interest. Not only is that a crime, quite frankly, but you are also losing money on that money. Inflation. So we've heard about cost of living, usually with the word crisis at the end of it. Quite frankly, I think the reason there's a cost of living crisis is not only because prices have gone up, but because nobody knows how to manage their money properly. That's another story. So cost of living, it comes from inflation. So when the cost of living increases, it's because inflation increases. What causes inflation? Prices rising. So we had a spell back when Russia invaded Ukraine, where all our utility bills went up, our heating, our gas, our electric, because we're not self-sufficient. That's another story. When heating bills go up, that affects the overall cost of everything and the overall cost of inflation. And if you were to look at inflation figures, goodness me, over the last 20, 30 years, you'd be quite astounded. So there are times in our lives where, for example, post-pandemic, and not so much just the pandemic, but the after effects of the pandemic, the fact that you've got the war, you've got inflation, you've got all of this going on. In October 22, which is really only a couple of years ago, inflation was at 11.1%. That meant that everything this year cost 11% more than everything had cost last year. If your money was sitting in just a bank account, not earning any money, your £100 would be 11% less than it was. It would buy you 11% less of everything. So instead of a whole loaf of bread, you'd get, just over 85% of a loaf of bread. But then conversely, if we go back to April 2015, and I haven't bothered to really look up what the reasons for this are, but inflation was at 0.1%, which is astounding. So there's this huge range. And depending on how you Google it, what answer you come up with. But I asked the question, what was the 20-year average inflation figure? Okay, the 20-year average inflation figure was 2.47. So just about 2.5% year on year inflation increases. And then it also says that there's something called the long-term average, which I think probably takes it out over a bigger period, which is 2.23, so 2.25%. If you look at the period between 1989 and 2024, you're looking at 2.83. Quite frankly, there's endless numbers that you could pick. I think if we just sort of look as an average about 2.5%, that's the average cost of inflation. If your money is not earning at least 2.5%, your money tomorrow won't be worth the same money as it was yesterday. Goodness, I really had that is in my little world, that's such a simple thing to understand. And I know people will be listening to this and going, oh, she's talking maths and percentages and numbers, and I can't take it in. But please, 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 if you don't understand this, message me, book a call, I'll explain it. But if you've got an amount here, right, and we start nibbling away at it through inflation, it will be worth less. And therefore, if you do not put it somewhere where the amount that you're getting in interest versus the amount of inflation is at least the same, the money will keep being less rather than staying equal. Now, if you're watching on YouTube, that was really easy because I did hand movements for you. If you're listening to this on a podcast, I was waving my hands around generally as I do when I speak. So just click the show notes and I'll show you. One other thing that I'm going to put in the show notes, and I'll put it in as an Excel spreadsheet so that if you want to, you can download it and you can have a look at the numbers. But I went back and I started thinking about this and I thought, well, hold on a second. When we first started investing, we had a 50,000 pot, and that was pretty much 20 years ago. If I put that £50,000 into a bank account where it earned no interest, at roughly 2.5, I use the 2.47 number. I used the 20-year average because I knew that I was just looking at what would have happened to my money over 20 years. But that £50,000 by the second year would have been worth 2.4% less, so 48,765 in what they call in real terms. I don't know if that's real to you or not. The point is, at the end of 20 years, if that had been eroded in a sense, in a real sense, if it was worth less because everything else was currently being worth 2.4%, 2.47% more, that money would have been nearly £19,000 less in value. So think about this. You've heard the term purchasing power. So let me think. If I want to go and buy a cup that is £10 and inflation is going to make that £12.47 next year because it's going to go up by 2.4%. And I've only got £10 and that £10 has been sitting in my bank account for a year earning no money. So it's still £10. When I come to buy that cup, which is now £12.47p, I can't afford it anymore because I've only got £10 in my hands because my money did nothing. And I hope that that's probably the easiest metaphor that I can give you. So if I had left my £50,000 in a bank account, it would be worth £18,911 less in real terms because everything else would have increased in value if I'd done nothing with it. So it would have dropped in value to being worth only 62% of what it was. It would have lost 38% of its value compounded over 20 years. And that's if all things stay equal. And I did it over the last 20 years. So my £50,000 would only be worth 31,000 and a bit in change. And therefore, if you want to buy a cup that was worth £10 and inflation is at 2.47, so next year it's going to be worth £12.47. You don't do anything to your £10 today, you can't afford a mug. You're going to struggle with everything, your weekly shopping bills, your utility bills, every time your mortgage is up, your mortgage, when you need to decorate and you've got to buy a pot of paint, when you've got to put petrol in your car, everything will be costing you, on average, 2.47% more because of inflation. Now, we're never taught this at school. I don't know about you, I was never taught this. I was taught about adding and taking away and dividing, but none of that explains inflation to me. If I'd understood inflation, Lordy, I'd have been saving so much sooner. Fortunately, I don't think I even clocked onto inflation, but I clocked onto my money needed to work for me 20 years ago. Now let's just look at some simple maths. I'm making it simple, I promise. And look at the word investing. So what we're saying now is inflation was making my money worth less. Yes, there was still £50,000 sitting in my fictionary bank account after 20 years. But what my £50,000 could buy was only worth 31 odd thousand pounds back in the old days. That's how much less I could buy. Now, what we're looking at is saying, well, what if I had put my money to work? And if I just took my money and said, right, I've just put it in a straightforward 5% guaranteed for life, 5% compounding, because that's quite nice if it compounds, savings account. You put 50,000 in at the top, and each year it's worth 5% more. So after 1 year, it's worth £2,500. That year, you're going to get 5% on £52,500. So the following year, it's worth £55,125. And then you're going to get 5% on that, and so on and so forth. Now, remember that story I told you as a metaphor about what if you took a pound and you doubled it? It takes ages to get it going, ages to get it going. So here you are with this variation on that metaphor. And on year one, you've got £50,000, and 7 years later, you've only got £67,000, and 10 years later, you've only got £77,000. And you're just wondering if this is really all worth it. And then all of a sudden, before you know it, year 16, you've got £100,000, and year 20, you've got £126,000. That £50,000 with compounding interest, the compounding compounds. The money that you don't take out builds and builds and builds and builds and builds. And in the end, your money that was worth and was actually a £50,000 note, not that there is one of those, gets interest for 20 years and becomes £126,347.51. That's a massive, more than £76,000 more from doing nothing other than putting your money into a savings account where you're going to earn some interest. And like I said to you, I use Raisin, and then I pick the various accounts that I want my money to go into for the various periods. You don't have to put away £50,000 for 20 years. I'm using it as an example. I'm trying to show you the difference between inflation, where the £50,000 was worth 31, and on a simple flat 5%, your 50,000 is worth 126 and a bit. That's enormous. That's enormous. Now, what if you could do better than 5%? Now, there'll be ups and downs, and it depends on who you invest in, and you can do the stock market, and the stock market tells you how it makes 10%. That's if you pick the right shares. That's if you stay in for the right length of time. And that's if you don't get tempted to pull your money back out. And the issue we have with shares is that a lot of people's pensions are based on shares. You don't get a monthly payout. You get your annual, share yield investment lump sum at the end of a year. And that's okay if that's been a good year. If that's been a good year, you'll get out your equivalent of 8 or 10% or whatever the number is. And that money then goes into your account, and then that pays for your living expenses for the next year. That's how your pensions effectively work. What if it's been a bad year? Then all of a sudden that payout doesn't come. What if there's 2 or 3 bad years on the road? What if you have Brexit followed by COVID, followed by massive inflation, and that upsets everything? What if you have another global crisis like we did in 2008 through to 10-12? That is going to affect your payout, and you have no control over that. And then this is why I go back to investing in property, because yes, the interest rates will go up and down. Just in the last couple of years, we've seen them as low as 3%, and then they hit 6 and something, and now they're steady at about a 4-5. They go up and they go down. And you can prepare for what's coming by getting in your mortgage offers early. I've just done the same thing on a buy-to-let property. I've just done the same thing on our home. I've made sure that 6 months out, I've got my mortgage offer and so on and so forth. And I line all of this stuff up, and you can learn this stuff easily. And If you come over and you join the Wealthy Life community, that's the sort of stuff that we will be talking about in there. But what I want to say to you here is that by investing in property, I put my £50,000 into a property. I have earned different percentages on different years, depending on the combination of the interest rate, the rents, but the rents have gone up steadily because if I just talk to you about inflation, inflation affects everything, including rents. So including rents, my tenants' rents have gone up from, let's say, in 2008 to just past 2019 in a 10-year period. The rent on one property went up from 525 to 725. Now, even without getting my calculator out, that's almost a 30% increase. I've seen properties since COVID go up in value from 600 and something a month to in excess of 900. One of the properties that we're just renting out now has gone from 625 to 975. Again, that's well over a 30% increase. And that's happened in a 4-year period, not like the other example in a 10-year period. So rents are going up, and we know that rents will go up. Rents will go up because there aren't enough properties for people to rent. We are continuing to breed, we continue to live longer, we've got more people moving into the country than moving out of the country, all of that sort of stuff. We live on an island, we have a shortage of space, and on top of all of that, we've got decades of insufficient, let's call it, residency generation, places for people to live, whether it's house building or flat building, or actually simply renovating the stock we've already got and bringing it up to standard, or thinking about taking 2-bedroom houses and putting loft extensions on them, or 3 bedrooms and making them 4, or 4 bedrooms and splitting them into flats. There's all sorts of things we could have been doing with, let's call them, the property assets that this country has in the first place. And instead, we've been spiraling down the other way. So we know that there is a housing shortage. We know that there is year-on-year inflation. And therefore, investing in property gives me a couple of things. No matter what happens to the interest rates, and they bobble along and go up and down, sometimes you get really great years, and then sometimes you get what we've got now, normal. My rent will always increase. As long as I keep my property clean and tidy and nothing dramatic like a sinkhole happening in the village, my property will increase in value. My property's rent will increase in value. My property will increase in value. So inflation not only applies to the rent that the tenant pays, inflation also applies to the value of the property itself. Well, then you're going to say, well, hold on a second. If inflation is a flat 2.5%, and then the rent goes up 2.5%, and the house goes up 2.5%, and the mortgage goes up 2.5%, doesn't it all stay equal? Well, in some senses, theoretically, but not, because although inflation is 2.5%, the rents are going up quicker because there's more pressure on the rents. The mortgages are sort of controlled by market demand and something called affordability, because wages don't go up like that for everybody. I mean, all right, we've just had a whole round of pay increases in the UK, negotiated by the Labour government, and some people have got huge pay rises, but your ordinary person in your ordinary job is not getting a 10% pay rise. They'll be lucky if they get an in line with inflation pay rise. So wages will only go up 2.5%. So we can't afford for the mortgages to become too expensive. Otherwise, you'll either end up with repossessions where people can't afford to pay the mortgages they've already taken out, or the house market stalls because people can't afford the borrowing. So there's constraints on the cost of mortgages, there's increased pressure on the rents, and then there's this nice desirability factor. Is one area suddenly becoming more popular, there's more demand, so the prices go up. Supply and demand affects the actual value of the house as well as the rents. So we have gone through the fact that, number one, you need to be paying attention to your money. You need to get to yourself where you're cash flow positive. Hopefully you're all there, and know that you're all there for a fact and not for a guess. And with this extra piece of money, you then need to start thinking, well, hang on a second, where is my spare cash? Is it just sitting in my bank account, actually not earning interest at all? Go out there and ask that question. And then when you start building up your resilience, why don't you put that resilience pot, save it up, put it into something like one of these raisin bank accounts, put it away maybe on a period where you don't have to give any notice, maybe put it away for 3 months. Maybe when you get enough money in there, put a little lump away for a year, maybe buy into your first ISA. Remember, although your allowance is £20,000, you could put £5,000 in your ISA this year and £5,000 next year and £5,000 the year after. And before you know it, you'll be building up your savings interest free. But then the other thing that you've got to look at is inflation. And if you are not making your money work hard, then effectively your money is just pouring out the sieve. It's just sinking away where inflation is making it worth less. So then you need to move from a position where you're looking at resilience to investing. How are you going to start investing? Now, you might be in a position where you're just trying to save up your resilience money. That's fine. It's all a journey that everybody's on. Some people are in a position where they've inherited a property that's mortgage free. Maybe they get bonuses. Maybe they get a lot of wages. Maybe they run a business where they are making a profit in that business and not quite sure what to do with that business. I mean, if you've got money in your business and that money is not in an account that's earning interest, you're just throwing that money away as well. And it's okay saying, well, you know, I just keep £5,000 in the account. That's fine. I would keep a small amount in there. And a lot of business bank accounts will charge you if you don't keep a set amount of money in the account anyway. But if you've got 10 grand, 20 grand, 50 grand, 100 grand, maybe even 500,000 of cash in your business that you are not employing to work harder for you by transferring it into a savings account, you could be costing yourself an absolute fortune, losing that money and then putting yourself into a position where you have to be working twice as hard. You know, if you had £100,000 sitting in your business, that could be worth 2.5% less in 12 months from now, instead of potentially 5% more. And that's why I use those numbers, 2.5% and 5%. What if you could get closer to 8% on your money by investing in property? And I use those figures because simple buy to let investments, when you've got to pay all your excess stamp duties, you've got to put them in a limited company, you've got to pay the higher rates that they charge you as a company-based investor. You know, you're paying higher rates, but you could still get, 7, 8, maybe more percent on your money if you invested in property. So this is the difference between inflation and investment. And investment takes many forms. Investment will totally apply to your personal circumstances, the money you have now, your appetite for risk, what's coming up in your future. So for example, if your children are just about to go off to university or go traveling, or you're just about to have a child, or you want to start a family, or you're going to give up work for some reason, all of these situations will affect your financial plans. And then that doesn't even account for all the surprises that are going to come your way. But you can still do something with your money by pacing it out. So let me just explain again how Raisin works. This is an advert for Raisin. And if you don't want to use Raisin and get the extra, I think it's £50 if I put the link in right, and you put some money in there and you've got to leave your money in there, and, you can't just put your money in and out in a day and still get 50 quid. It's got to be in there for a while. It is just a way to go to a website and look at comparable interest rates from various, I won't really call them, I'm going to use the word banks because that's as a collective noun, but investment houses. You could put this in to the internet and ask, where can I get the best interest on £50,000? And we did this earlier because I went to Raisin, Bob immediately went to the internet, and then we compared notes. And there were companies there that I didn't know the name of. The first couple of adverts that came up on Google were sponsored, and they were actually for stocks and shares style people. Now, whether you're going to give someone 5,000 or 50,000, I'd really want to understand the performance. And I know that there's no guarantees, but somehow a known name, whether it's a high street name like Barclays or NatWest or Santander or Halifax, there's a knownness about them. And if it's some other company who I don't know, I would want to dig into who that company is, how long they've been running, are they backed by the government guarantee? This is a key thing. So the UK government offers a guarantee for savings in an account in any one institution up to £85,000. So if I put £100,000 into Barclays and Barclays went bankrupt, I would get £85,000 back. It's guaranteed by the government. And this is because of all the situation that went on in 2008. We need people to save, because if we get people saving, then this is how those companies can then lend that money back out and earn interest on it. And there are many ways of doing this. I mean, if you get more and more risk cocky, I suppose, more of a risk taker, then there are private lendings on property. You could do your stocks and shares. You could invest in the market. You could do savings that invest in the market. There's all sorts of things that you could do. And I'm going to be speaking, one of the guest interviews inside the community is Jay Rooney, and I've spoken to him on the podcast before, and we're really going to be talking about saving into a sort of a shares ISA, because I'm really interested in putting our money in there. We've got some money that are just into what I would consider nice, safe savings accounts, and now I want something that's a little bit more has a greater risk appetite, I suppose. And it's odd, isn't it? Because I'd quite happily go and buy another house. You give me £50,000 and I wouldn't think twice about going to invest in another property, because I would look at the spreadsheet, I'd do all my due diligence on the property, and that, remember I call them brick banks, that brick bank would make sense for me. So I would know where the brick bank was, I would know the area, I would know what it looked like, I would know how it was structurally, I'd know what the return was, I'd know who the tenant was, I'll have seen inside it, I'll have looked at the walls, we'll have done a refurb, and I will feel comfortable with that investment. And I can do those like that. Then when you ask me to put money with someone else, this triggers my control issues. And this isn't supposed to be a webinar about me and my psychoses, but I would then want to really know where that money's going to, because whether it's 10,000 or whether it's 50,000, if I put my money into that investment, there is greater risk because it's moved on. I don't own anything. I've just lent my money to some institution. Whereas at least with the house, I own 25% of it. And yes, I know the bank owns the other 75. And I know where this has come from. I invested in crypto. I had a friend, they talked me into doing an investment. Crypto was about to go up. There was something coming down the line. I went to make the transfer of 5,000. Don't quite understand why it delayed, because I didn't know enough about it, hadn't quite done my due diligence. I had gone on faith from someone telling me about it. They said they had money in there. I put my money in there. And what happened? I lost all 5 grand. And it still irritates me. It was such a stupid mistake. It came from greed. It came from the greed, a lack of research, a lack of understanding, and moving into something. And I know I speak to people and they are doing well out of crypto. They keep their money there. But it's not something I'm interested in again, ever. However, I have had shares in the past and the shares have performed really well. But to me, shares are going to require another piece of my brain. So my property brain's easy peasy. That can do it all the time. If I now going to wake up a piece of my shares brain, I really have got to have a bit of time where I want to think it through. I want to understand my questions. I want to do my research. And that's why I'm going to be speaking to Jay. And it's going to be an interview for me to learn. So I thought I would share it with you. And once I understand it, then I'm going to make an informed decision. And what I'm saying to you is, do you understand the difference between inflation and investment? And if you don't understand that fundamentals, go back and listen to this again. Really look at the spreadsheet that I'm going to share with you and work out, what is your question? What is it that you don't understand, if there is something that you don't understand? And can I help you? Book a call. I'll happily do my best to talk you through, I suppose, the maths of it. Once you understand this, look at your own personal circumstances. Where is your money? How much is your money? And then once you've done it for yourself, have that conversation with other people. What are your parents doing with their money? What is your brother or sister doing with their money? Do your children understand? Where is your children's savings? Are they earning them the best money? Are you putting away money for your children that actually isn't going to be worth as much as that actual money that you've been slotting in that piggy bank? And for example, even that simple thing of a piggy bank, if you're saving up and you've got 100 quid sitting in a big piggy bank, it's not worth anything. Whereas you should be taking that once a month down to a savings account of some form, whether you do it online or whatever you do, so that you can pay it into somewhere and transfer it in something that's going to be making money for them. Particularly, again, just have to put this plug in here, if you have a daughter, because you know that if you don't start her pension for her, I think, was it by the age of 7 or was it 3? I can't remember what the figures were, something ridiculous. If you don't start your daughter's pension at, let's just say 7, it's never going to be equal to the same amount of money as your son, who won't start his pension until he goes to work at 18 plus. You need to be paying attention to where your money is and make your money work harder. Once you're confident, once you've got your resilience money and it's sitting in a little pot and it's earning you a little bit of interest, but more importantly, it's not losing you 2.5% a year, then you can start to get more confident. Then you can start to say, right, well, actually, just like some clients I've been speaking to today, I want to buy myself out of work. And that's what a lot of people say. A lot of my clients want to buy back their time. And if they can make their money work that bit harder, they can start to buy themselves out of work. They'll start with 1 day a week and then they'll move to 2 days a week. That's effectively what I've done. So, all right, I know over the summer I've been working harder in order to build the community for you and catching up on the podcasts, and we've got holidays coming up, etc. But the goal is for me to work a 3-day week. And I work that 3-day week and I have my Mondays and my Fridays off, so I can have my long weekends and go away if I want to, or build them up and pay myself back and take a big holiday. But that time flexibility for me is really important. And I've only achieved that because I've made my money work harder, except for that little pot that was just accidentally for a short while sitting in Metro earning 1.63 when I thought it was in a savings account earning me money. But I checked. Go away, please, check all your savings accounts, check where all your money is and make a difference. And then if you want to use Raisin, go and see the link in the show notes. And if it works for you, then simply click on the link and you can open up your Raisin account and you can start to explore where you can start to put your money. Some for resilience, and then some will be the building block for your investment account. And good luck. I hope you can make your money work harder for you and not be worth 2.5% less next year. Thank you very much for listening. Let me just say, I hope I've put some whoosh into your life. I hope I've got you thinking about the difference between inflation and investment, reminding you to check on your money and reminding you to build up your resilience fund. And if you just understood those 3 things, what inflation and investment is, where your money is right now, and is it earning you interest rather than losing you interest, and then do something about it, my job will be done. I would like to thank you for your time. I would like to thank you for listening. Of course, please subscribe, please leave a review, and I'll speak to you again next week as part of this whole series about generally property investing mindset. And I will speak to you again soon. Take care. Thank you very much for listening. I hope that you were really, really listening to the details there, the difference between inflation and investment, and understanding that If you don't do something with your money, it just drips away because of inflation, because of the pressure of everything around us costing more this year than it did last year and costing more next year than it has this year. And if you don't start making your money work even a little bit as hard as you are working, what's the point? What is the point? And I wonder if this is why sometimes some pensioners are in a position where they don't have as much money at the end, because their money just hasn't been working hard enough for them. I don't want you to be in that position. I want you to have a wealthy life. I want you to have a wealthy retirement whenever you choose to take it. So remember the 3 points that I made in this particular podcast. Manage your money and know that you are cash positive. And when you are cash positive, put that money towards a resilience fund of 3 or even better 6 months money. As that money builds up, put it into an account where you are going to be earning more money than the cost of living. I was in a position where I was going to earn 1.63 when inflation is 2.5. That's nonsense. What's the point of paying me interest at that rate of 1.663 because it's being gobbled up by inflation. So make sure that you are earning more than whatever inflation is. Then as you get more comfortable with this, start looking at whether you've got money in other places. Is that money earning you interest? What rate of interest is it earning you? If you just go straight forward onto either the internet or, as I say, my preferred option is Raisin Bank, and start to look at the potential interest rates that you could be earning out there. If you're not earning as much as that, maybe now is the time to change your savings account. I know it's a palaver, but what would you rather do? A little bit of palaver from, I don't know, even if you get stuck in one of those telephone loops, an hour, 2 hours, 3 hours, but know that for the rest of your year, that your money is just earning you more money than it would have been if you did nothing about it. Surely that's worth a little bit of your time, because you'll get it back in spades afterwards. And then once you've got more confident with this, is that the time to have a conversation about, okay, I've actually got all my money sorted out now, and I've got quite a bit of money actually. I'd like to invest in property because what I want to do is make my money work even harder. And I don't have the shares brain. I can leverage your investment brain, your property investment brain, and I don't want to get into crypto or whatever else it is. So you can start to have those thoughts. And of course, the last little thing for you, if you want to, please click on the link, which is also in the show notes, to join the community. The Wealthy Life community is going to have so many resources in there for you. Private interviews and webinars if you join the inner circle, but loads of resources generally in the Wealthy Life community. I look forward to seeing you over there, and I hope this has really made you think about money. I need to finish soon because otherwise that 3:33 alarm's going to be going off, asking me the question, how have I been successful? And I'd ask you that question. How have you been successful today as a result of listening to this webinar? How have you been successful? What are you going to do differently? I wish you all the very best, and I will speak to you next week. Thank you.